My name is Clay Weston, and at 67 years old, I never imagined my own son would try to kill me. Douglas, my only child, locked me inside my own home without food or medication while he flew to Las Vegas with money stolen from my accounts. The look in his eyes when he screamed those words still haunts me. If you think family always has your back, my story might change your mind. Before I share what happened, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you love. Trust me, what happened next shocked even the police. I spent 45 years as a construction foreman in the Pittsburgh area before retiring. My hands built half the office buildings downtown, and I took pride in that. When I finally hung up my hard hat 5 years ago, I settled into the family home where I was born, a sturdy 2-story farmhouse on 5 acres of land outside Greenfield, Pennsylvania. The nearest neighbors are half a mile down the country road, which never bothered me until recently. My wife Elaine and I plan to travel during retirement, maybe see the Grand Canyon or visit Hawaii. We never made it. Pancreatic cancer took her 3 years ago, and the house grew quiet in ways I still struggle with. Most nights I sit on the back porch watching the sunset, talking to her as if she might answer. The property has been in my family for 4 generations. My grandfather taught me how to fish in the creek that runs through the back acres. Dad showed me how to repair the stone foundation. I raised Douglas in this house, teaching him to throw a baseball in the side yard. The mortgage was paid off 20 years ago, and between my pension and modest savings, I lived comfortably. Not wealthy, but secure. Douglas was always the smart one. Top of his class, full scholarship to Penn State for business. I still remember the day he got accepted. Elaine cried with pride while I pretended something was in my eye. We worked overtime and weekends to help with his expenses, eating beans and rice some months to make sure he had everything he needed. When he graduated and landed that investment banking job in Philadelphia, I felt like all our sacrifices were worth it. He visited regularly while Elaine was alive. Holidays, birthdays, sometimes just random weekends. Always brought expensive wine we couldn't afford and talked about his clients. After she died, the visits grew shorter and less frequent. Phone calls became texts, which eventually dwindled to the occasional, "Sorry, busy with work" message. I understood. He had his own life, or at least that's what I told myself. What I didn't know was that Douglas had a gambling problem. I discovered it completely by accident last year, when I found betting receipts in his car while borrowing it during one of his rare visits. When I asked about them, he dismissed it as just a hobby and changed the subject. I should have pushed harder, but parents sometimes see what they want to see. The first hints of real trouble came 6 months ago. Douglas called asking for a small loan of $3,000 for car repairs. I sent it without question. 2 weeks later, he needed another $5,000 for a work emergency. Again, I transferred the money. Then came a request for $10,000 that he swore he'd pay back as soon as his bonus cleared. Something felt wrong, but I trusted my son. That's what fathers do, right? 3 months ago, I found loan rejection letters in Douglas's glove compartment when I was looking for his insurance card. 5 different banks had turned him down. The amounts were staggering: $50,000, $70,000. When I mentioned finding them, he snatched them from my hand and told me I was invading his privacy. That same weekend, he suggested I should sell the family home and downsize to something more manageable. Said property values were high, and I could make a fortune. When I told him I had no interest in selling, his face changed for just a second. A flash of something cold I'd never seen before. The following week, I went to withdraw money from my account, and the teller mentioned an unusual transfer. $20,000 had been moved to an account I didn't recognize. When I asked for details, I discovered Douglas had somehow added his name to my accounts without my knowledge or consent. The bank manager showed me the paperwork with what looked like my signature, but I never signed anything. I called my old friend James, who practices elder law, and he helped me secure my remaining funds and start the process of removing Douglas from my accounts. James also suggested updating my will, which hadn't been changed since Elaine died. We spent an afternoon going through everything, with James taking detailed notes about my assets and wishes. When I confronted Douglas about the unauthorized access, he broke down crying, said he had gambling debts to people who were threatening him, swore he was going to pay everything back, begged me not to cut him off. Like any father, I wanted to believe him. He promised to get help, to make things right. "Dad, I'm so sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I hit rock bottom, but I'm getting help. Please give me one more chance." 2 weeks later, Douglas showed up at my door unannounced. He brought an expensive bottle of wine and premium steaks, said he wanted to reconnect, to rebuild our relationship. I was cautiously hopeful as we grilled dinner and talked about old times. He seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking questions about my routine, my friends, my activities. Now I understand he was gathering information. After dinner, we went through old family photo albums. Douglas seemed particularly nostalgic, asking about stories from his childhood and listening intently. He refilled my wine glass repeatedly, and when I mentioned feeling tired, he insisted on making me his special tea before bed. "It's a new herbal blend," he said with a smile. "Helps me sleep like a baby." As I drifted off that night, I felt hopeful that my son and I might be finding our way back to each other. I had no idea what the morning would bring. I woke up feeling strange. My mouth was dry, my thoughts foggy. Sunlight streamed through the windows, much brighter than when I usually wake up. The clock read 11:30. I never sleep past 6. My limbs felt heavy as I tried to get out of bed, and the room tilted when I stood. Something was wrong. The tea. Douglas must have put something in it. I stumbled down the hallway, gripping the wall for support. As I approached my home office, I heard papers rustling. Through the partially open door, I could see Douglas hunched over my desk, going through my files. He was muttering to himself as he rifled through documents, occasionally taking photos with his phone. "Douglas?" My voice came out weaker than I expected. He jumped, nearly knocking over the chair. For a split second, his face showed panic before settling into an unconvincing smile. "Dad, you're up. I was just organizing some of your paperwork. You really should have a better filing system." He quickly shuffled the papers together, but not before I noticed what he was holding. The deed to my house and documents from my safe deposit box, things I never kept in my desk. "What are you doing with those?" I asked, stepping into the room. "Just helping you get organized," he repeated, but his eyes darted to the door. When I moved closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A document with my signature at the bottom, except I hadn't signed anything. Next to it was a practice sheet with attempts to copy my handwriting. "What is this?" I demanded, picking up the property deed. It had been altered to add Douglas's name as co-owner. His facade crumbled instantly. "Dad, you don't understand. I'm in trouble. Real trouble." "What kind of trouble justifies forging my signature?" "I owe money to people you don't want to know. Dangerous people." His voice cracked. "They're threatening to break my legs. Or worse. So your solution is to steal from me? Your own father? I just need your signature on a few papers. The bank will give me a home equity loan if you co-sign. I'll pay it all back, I swear." I shook my head. "You need professional help, Douglas. Not more money." "You don't get it," he hissed, suddenly angry. "These aren't people you can stall. They want their money now. Then we'll go to the police." "The police?" He laughed bitterly. "These guys have cops on their payroll." I stood my ground. "I'm not signing anything, and I'm not withdrawing money from my retirement accounts. That's final." Something changed in his face then. The desperation was replaced by something colder, more calculated. "Dad, please." His tone softened again, pleading. "I'm your son, your only child, and I love you, but this ends now. We're going to get you real help." I reached for my cell phone on the desk. That's when Douglas snapped. "You stubborn old man," he shouted, knocking the phone from my hand. "You'd rather see me dead than touch your precious money." "This isn't about money," I said, shocked by his outburst. "This is about your gambling addiction. "Shut up!" he screamed, his face contorted with rage. "You think you know everything. You think you're so much better than me." He began pacing the room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair. "What about all those years I listened to you, bragging about your stupid construction jobs? Built this building, built that bridge. Nobody cares. While I was making real money, you were playing with dirt and cement." The venom in his voice stunned me. Had he always felt this way? Suddenly, he stopped pacing and stared at me with a chilling smile. "You know what? There's more than one way to solve this problem." What happened next still plays in my mind like a nightmare. Douglas grabbed my shoulders and shoved me back against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his face inches from mine. "I've been approved for a loan using your information. I just need a few days for everything to clear. You're going to stay here quietly while I take care of business." "You can't be serious," I said, trying to push past him. "I'm calling the police." Douglas blocked my path. "No, you're not." He went through the house methodically, collecting all the phones. He cut the landline wires with kitchen scissors. Then he went to the bathroom and emptied my pill organizer into his pocket. "What are you doing?" I asked, my chest tightening at the sight of my heart medication disappearing. "I need those." "You'll get them back when I return," he said coldly. "Consider it insurance." Over the next hour, I watched in disbelief as my son transformed our home into a prison. He took hammers, screwdrivers, and anything that could be used as a tool. He boarded up several windows with plywood he found in the garage. The electronic door locks I'd installed last year after a neighborhood break-in were reprogrammed. My car keys vanished into his pocket. "Douglas, this is kidnapping," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "You'll go to prison for this." "Only if someone finds out," he replied, emptying the refrigerator of most food. He left 2 cans of soup and half a loaf of bread on the counter. "This should last until I get back." "Back from where?" I demanded. "Vegas. That's where I need to meet these guys. The loan money will clear tomorrow. Then I'll fly out, pay them off, and be back in 3 days." He glanced at the meager supplies. "You'll be hungry, but you won't starve." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son was imprisoning me without food or heart medication so he could fly to Las Vegas with fraudulently obtained money. "You won't get away with this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Douglas walked to the front door, suitcase in hand. He turned back with a look I didn't recognize, a stranger wearing my son's face. "You'll rot in here," he spat. "Maybe going hungry will help you understand what it's like to be desperate." The door slammed shut, followed by the electronic beep of the lock engaging. Through the window, I watched him load his suitcase into his car and drive away without looking back. I stood frozen in shock, unable to process what had just happened. My son had drugged me, imprisoned me, stolen my medication, and left me with barely any food, all for gambling money. My first instinct was to break a window, but Douglas had thought of that. The few windows without plywood had been secured with additional locks. I tried calling out to neighbors before remembering they were too far away to hear me. The full impact hit me as I slumped onto the sofa. My chest tightened painfully, the beginning of what felt like a heart attack. Without my medication, my condition would deteriorate quickly. I'd raised a son who was willing to let me die for money. As panic rose in my throat, one thought kept circling. How did I not see the monster he had become? The first 24 hours were the hardest. After the initial shock wore off, I took inventory of my situation. 2 cans of soup, half a loaf of bread, no phone, no medication, no way to contact the outside world. I searched the house for anything Douglas might have overlooked, a hidden phone, tools, anything that could help me escape. He'd been thorough. Even the kitchen knives were gone. The windows he hadn't boarded up were double-paned and designed to withstand Pennsylvania winters. Breaking them without tools would be nearly impossible, especially for a man my age with arthritis. My rural location, once a source of peace, had become my enemy. No neighbors close enough to notice anything amiss. No regular visitors who might become concerned by my absence. By evening, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that signaled cardiac distress. I searched through every jacket pocket and drawer, finally finding an old pill that had fallen out of my organizer weeks ago. It wasn't much, but it took the edge off the pain. Conserving the little food I had became my priority. Half a slice of bread for breakfast. A few spoonfuls of cold soup for dinner. Water from the tap, thankfully still running. I tried not to think about what would happen when the food ran out. As night fell on that first day, sitting alone in the growing darkness, I thought about my life. How had it come to this? My son, whom I'd coached in Little League and taught to drive, had locked me away to die. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. Yet somewhere inside me, a stubborn spark refused to go out. I'd grown up poor in rural Pennsylvania, the son of a coal miner. My grandfather had survived the Great Depression and taught me that Weston men don't give up. During my brief military service before finding work in construction, I'd learned that survival often comes down to mindset more than circumstances. I thought of Elaine during her final months. The cancer ravaged her body, but she never lost her dignity or determination. If she could face death with such grace, I could certainly fight to live. Mourning brought clarity. If I couldn't break out, I needed to find another way to communicate with the outside world. I needed to search the house more systematically. Starting at the top floor, I worked my way down, checking every room, closet, and cabinet. My arthritic knees protested as I climbed up and down stairs, but I pushed through the pain. Douglas knew the main floors of the house well, but there was one place he rarely ventured as a child: the basement. The door to the basement was in the back of the kitchen pantry, easily overlooked if you didn't know it was there. My heart leapt when I found it unlocked. Douglas must have forgotten about it entirely. Navigating the steep stairs in my weakened state was treacherous. I descended slowly, gripping the handrail with both hands. The basement was cold and damp, illuminated only by two small windows at ground level, too small for even a child to crawl through. At first, the basement appeared to hold nothing useful. Old furniture, boxes of Christmas decorations, tools too large to carry upstairs or use effectively. I was about to give up when I noticed something in the far corner, a large tarp covering what looked like electronic equipment. Pulling back the dusty cover, I felt a surge of emotion. Underneath was my late brother Walter's ham radio setup. Walter had been an avid radio operator before his death 10 years ago. I'd inherited his equipment but never had the heart to get rid of it, despite not sharing his hobby. Walter had tried countless times to interest me in amateur radio. "It's a lifeline, Clay," he'd said. "When all other communication fails, radio waves still get through." During the rare times I'd shown interest, he'd taught me the basics of operation and maintenance. I studied the equipment with growing hope. The radio was old, but had been top of the line when Walter owned it. If I could get it working, I might be able to contact someone. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. The setup was coated with years of dust. I carefully wiped down each component, checking for obvious damage. The main power supply had corroded battery terminals. Several wires had been gnawed by mice. The antenna connection was completely severed. My construction background proved invaluable. I'd spent decades solving problems with limited resources on building sites. I found wire in an old lamp I could strip to replace the damaged connections. A metal coat hanger could temporarily substitute for the broken antenna component. Vinegar from the pantry helped clean the battery corrosion. Hours turned into a full day as I worked in the dim basement light. My stomach growled with hunger, but I ignored it, focusing entirely on the radio. If this didn't work, I likely wouldn't survive until Douglas returned. Night had fallen by the time I had the radio reassembled. My hands trembled as I connected the final wires. This was my only chance. If it failed, I had no backup plan. I said a silent prayer to Elaine and Walter before flipping the power switch. Nothing happened. Despair threatened to overwhelm me until I remembered the backup battery pack Walter always kept charged. I found it in a separate case, still holding a partial charge after all these years. Connecting it to the radio, I tried again. This time, the front panel lights flickered weakly to life. The radio hummed, and the frequency display glowed dimly in the dark basement. Now came the hard part, finding someone to hear me. Getting the radio powered on was only the first step in a difficult journey. The next challenge was establishing contact with another operator. I turned the frequency dial slowly, listening for any voices through the static. The radio's reception was weak, due to my improvised repairs and limited power supply. For hours I broadcast simple distress calls into the void. CQ, CQ, emergency situation. This is. I hesitated to use my real name or location, fearing Douglas might somehow intercept the communication. Instead, I used Walter's old call sign, hoping some local operator might recognize it. By the third day of my imprisonment, hunger and dehydration were taking their toll. My hands shook constantly, making it difficult to adjust the radio's sensitive dials. My chest pain had returned, worse than before. I allowed myself only tiny sips of water, knowing it needed to last. The basement grew colder as night approached again. I wrapped myself in old blankets found in storage, refusing to give up my position at the radio. Just as my eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion, I heard it, a human voice cutting through the static. KC3RDB, this is KX3TLY. I read you weak but clear. Over. I fumbled with the microphone, my heart racing. KX3TLY, thank you for responding. This is a genuine emergency situation. The voice belonged to Terry Miller, an amateur radio enthusiast from Brookfield, about 30 miles from my property. He sounded young, and initially skeptical when I explained my situation. Let me get this straight, Terry said. You're saying your son locked you in your house, cut off communication, took your medication, and flew to Las Vegas? That's hard to believe, sir. I know how it sounds, I replied, desperation in my voice. But I'm a 70-year-old man with a heart condition. I have no food, no phone, and no way out. Please, contact the police for a wellness check. Terry's doubt was evident in his hesitant responses. Do you have any way to verify your story? I thought quickly, then remembered that Walter had been well known in the local ham radio community. This equipment belonged to Walter Weston. I'm his brother Clay. Walter was part of the Western Pennsylvania Radio Club for 20 years before he passed. He used to bring homemade apple pies to the summer gatherings. There was a long pause. Wait, you're Walter Weston's brother? The Walter who helped set up emergency communication after the flood of '93? Yes, that's him. Terry's tone changed immediately. I never met Walter personally, but he's a legend among older operators. My mentor talked about him all the time. With this connection established, Terry took my situation more seriously. He promised to contact the local police department, but warned me they might need more evidence before forcing entry into a private residence. They can't just break down doors based on a radio call, Terry explained. They'll need something more substantial. Our conversation was interrupted by the radio's battery indicator flashing red. The power was failing. Terry, I don't have much battery left. Can you stay on this frequency? Check back every few hours? I'll do better than that, he replied. I'll keep this channel open on continuous monitoring. Save your battery, but check in when you can. As the radio went dark, I felt a mixture of hope and despair. I had made contact, but would it lead to rescue in time? The next morning, Terry's voice crackled through the radio again. The news wasn't good. Clay. I spoke with the police. They did a drive-by of your property but saw nothing suspicious. They said your son told neighbors you were visiting relatives in Florida for 2 weeks. My heart sank. Douglas had thought of everything. What about my medical condition? I need my heart medication. They said without clear evidence of danger, they can't justify a forced entry. I'm sorry. I leaned back against the cold basement wall, fighting despair. The battery indicator showed less than 20% power remaining. Soon, even this tenuous connection to the outside world would be gone. As I sat contemplating my dwindling options, A sudden realization hit me. Douglas had always been careless with his electronics. During visits, he often left tablets or laptops behind, claiming he had so many devices he barely noticed. Could he have forgotten something here during previous visits? Something I could use to communicate more directly. I forced my weakening body up the basement stairs and began a new search of the house, focusing on places Douglas might have stored forgotten devices. His old bedroom, the guest room closet, the living room cabinets. In the back of his childhood bedroom closet, behind board games and high school trophies, I found it, an old tablet computer. My hands trembled as I pressed the power button, expecting a dead battery after months of disuse. To my shock, the screen illuminated with Douglas's lock screen. Even more surprising, the Wi-Fi icon showed an active connection. In his haste, Douglas had forgotten to disable the home internet service. This oversight might save my life, but I still faced an obstacle. I needed Douglas's password to access the tablet. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. His college graduation year. Wrong again. I only had a few attempts before potentially being locked out completely. Taking a deep breath, I tried something else. Elaine's birthday. The tablet unlocked instantly. Despite everything, Douglas still used his mother's birth date as his password. The tablet was not only unlocked but still logged into Douglas's email, cloud storage, and social media accounts. I could see everything, including emails confirming his flight to Las Vegas and the fraudulent loan documents he'd submitted using my identity. More importantly, I now had a direct way to contact him. I took photos of my boarded windows, the empty refrigerator, and my own haggard appearance after days without proper food or medication. Then I composed an email to my son with an attachment he couldn't ignore. Sitting at Douglas's old desk, I stared at the tablet screen, carefully crafting my message. This would be my only chance to force his return before my condition deteriorated further. Douglas, I began, I'm sending this from your own tablet that you forgot in your old bedroom. As you can see from the attached photos, I am still locked inside the house. I have no food left, and my heart medication is gone. My condition is getting worse. I attached the photos I'd taken, making sure the date stamp was visible. What you don't know is that I've discovered the extent of your fraud. I've found copies of the loan applications you submitted using my name. I've seen the emails from your gambling contacts in Las Vegas. This was a calculated risk. Douglas might panic and decide not to return at all, but I needed to apply maximum pressure. I am giving you 24 hours to return home and release me. If you do not, all of this evidence will be automatically sent to your employer, the police, and the loan officers you've been dealing with. This is not a bluff. I added one final line, speaking as a father rather than a victim. I raised you better than this, son. You still have a chance to make the right choice. I scheduled the email to send copies to authorities in 24 hours if I didn't cancel it, then hit send on the original message to Douglas. Within minutes, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. Douglas's name flashed on the screen. I answered with unsteady hands. Dad? How did you? His voice was panicked, higher pitched than normal. It doesn't matter how, I interrupted. What matters is that you're coming home now to fix this. I can't just leave. I'm in the middle of negotiations here. These are dangerous people, more dangerous than letting your father die. Because that's what's happening, Douglas. My heart is giving out without medication. There was silence on the line. Then his voice returned, desperate and pleading. Dad, you don't understand. I owe them over $200,000. They've threatened to break my legs, or worse. And your solution was to leave me to die slowly? Your own father? I was going to come back. I just needed a few days to sort everything out. With what money, Douglas? The loan you got by forging my signature? Another silence. I could hear casino sounds in the background, slot machines ringing, muffled conversations. The loan already cleared, he finally admitted. But it's not enough. They're asking for more now. That's how it works with loan sharks, son. The debt always grows. It never shrinks. I heard him breathing heavily, on the verge of tears or rage. I couldn't tell which. I'm sending everything I've found to the police in 24 hours unless you're standing in front of me with my medication. You're blackmailing me? He asked incredulously. I'm trying to save both of us, I corrected him. You from prison, me from death. Your choice. The call ended abruptly. I had no way of knowing if he was rushing to the airport or digging himself deeper into trouble. As night fell on my third day of captivity, my condition worsened dramatically. The last of my food was gone. My water intake was limited to small sips. The chest pain had become constant, radiating down my left arm, a classic heart attack warning sign. I managed to find a small leak in the kitchen ceiling where rainwater had collected in a bowl I'd placed hours earlier. The water tasted of dust and roofing materials, but it was liquid. I rationed it carefully. Using the tablet's remaining battery, I documented everything in a note file, the events leading to my imprisonment, Douglas's actions, and my deteriorating health. If I didn't survive, there would be a record of what happened. I also wrote several personal notes. One to James, my lawyer friend, with instructions for my estate. Another to my brother's widow, thanking her for the radio equipment that had given me hope. A final one to Douglas. Not filled with anger as might be expected, but with reflection on where our relationship had gone wrong and how I had failed to see his addiction developing. The tablet battery dipped below 10% as evening turned to night. I placed it in power-saving mode and returned to Walter's radio for one final check-in with Terry. I've made contact with my son, I told him weakly. He knows I've found evidence of his crimes. I think he'll return soon. That's good news, Terry replied, his voice barely audible through the dying radio. But maybe I should still try the police again? If you don't hear from me by tomorrow night, yes, I agreed. But give the tablet message time to work. As midnight approached, I dragged myself upstairs to my bedroom, too exhausted and weak to remain vigilant. If Douglas returned, I would hear the electronic lock disengage. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my dreams filled with Elaine's face and memories of Douglas as a smiling child. The sound of tires on gravel jolted me awake. Headlights swept across my bedroom ceiling as a vehicle pulled into the driveway at high speed. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. I heard frantic beeping as someone punched codes into the electronic door lock. Then the distinctive sound of the front door slamming open against the wall. "Dad!" Douglas's voice echoed through the house. "Dad!" I tried to call out, but my voice was too weak. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and my bedroom door burst open. Douglas stood in the doorway, his appearance shocking. His normally well-groomed hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. Dark circles surrounded wild, bloodshot eyes. "Oh God, Dad," he whispered. Seeing my condition, he rushed to my side, pulling an orange prescription bottle from his pocket. "I brought your medication. And water. Here, take these." As I swallowed the pills with shaking hands, Douglas paced the room like a caged animal. "We have a problem," he said, glancing repeatedly toward the window. "They followed me here." "Who followed you?" "The people I owe money to. I thought I lost them in Pittsburgh, but their car just pulled up behind the trees at the edge of the property." His voice cracked with panic. "They want all the money. Right now." "What money?" "The loan?" "Yes. I was supposed to pay them in Vegas. But when I got your message, I ran. Took the first flight back." He ran his hands through his hair. "Dad, these guys don't mess around. They hurt people. So your plan is what? To give them my house?" Douglas didn't answer, but his eyes darted to my closet, where I kept a small home safe. "You still want to rob me," I said, the realization hitting harder than any physical pain. "Even now." "It's not like that," he shouted, suddenly aggressive. "They'll kill me, maybe both of us." The medication was already helping clear my head. Despite my weakness, I managed to sit upright. "Douglas, the evidence is already set to send automatically. Stealing more money won't solve anything." His face contorted with rage and desperation. "Cancel it. Cancel the evidence email now." "No." Douglas lunged toward me, grabbing my shoulders roughly. "You don't get it. These guys will burn this house down with us inside. Where's the tablet? As he shook me, demanding the tablet's location, headlights again swept across the windows. But these weren't the loan sharks. Red and blue lights flashed across the bedroom walls. Police sirens wailed in the driveway. Douglas froze, his hands still gripping my shoulders. "What did you do?" he whispered. I looked my son directly in the eyes, summoning every ounce of parental authority I'd ever possessed. "Douglas, listen to me very carefully. We have about 30 seconds to decide how this ends." His grip on my shoulders loosened slightly. Outside, car doors slammed as officers approached the house. "Those loan sharks out there? They're your problem. But what you did to me is a separate issue. Elder abuse, attempted murder, fraud. That's decades in prison." His eyes widened with fear. I continued, my voice steady despite my physical weakness. "I can tell the police everything. Or I can say I accidentally locked myself in while you were away on business. Your choice, but you have to make it now." "Why would you help me?" he whispered. "After what I did? Because I'm your father. But this is your last chance, Douglas. One-time offer. Are you going to face your gambling problem and get real help?" A loud knock at the front door punctuated my question. "Police, open up." Douglas's face crumpled, the facade of the successful businessman completely gone. For the first time since this ordeal began, I glimpsed the son I remembered. "I need help, Dad," he admitted, voice breaking. "I don't know how to stop." "Then hide. Now. Let me handle this." Douglas slipped into the hallway just as another series of knocks echoed through the house. I called out as loudly as my weakened state allowed. "Coming! I'm coming!" It took all my strength to reach the front door. I opened it to find 2 police officers with hands resting on their holsters. "Mr. Weston? Clay Weston?" asked the taller officer. "Yes, that's me." "Sir, we received a concerning call about your welfare from a radio operator named Terry Miller. May we come in?" I hesitated, glancing back into the house. "Officers, I appreciate your concern. There's been a misunderstanding." The officers exchanged skeptical looks. "Sir, you appear to be in medical distress. And why are these windows boarded up?" Before I could answer, a dark SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past the house. Even from the doorway, I could feel the menace emanating from the vehicle. The officers noticed it too. "Sir, is there someone else on your property?" I made a split-second decision. "Officers, I need to tell you something, but not out here. Please, come inside." Once the door was closed, I explained a carefully edited version of events. Yes, I had been locked in accidentally. Yes, my son had gone away briefly. No, I hadn't had access to my medication. But the most urgent matter was the men watching the house. My son owes money to some dangerous people. They followed him here tonight. The officers immediately shifted into alert mode. One called for backup, while the other asked detailed questions about the SUV and its occupants. As we spoke, I heard a creak from the direction of the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling. Douglas was hiding in the small crawl space. The officer heard it too. "Is someone else in the house, Mr. Weston?" I manufactured a coughing fit to cover any additional noise. Just the old house settling. About those men outside. Backup arrived within minutes. 2 additional patrol cars blocking the driveway. The SUV that had been watching the house sped away as soon as sirens approached, but not before an officer captured the license plate. An ambulance followed shortly after, paramedics rushing in with medical equipment. They checked my vitals, confirming what I already knew. I was suffering from dehydration, malnutrition, and cardiac distress. "Sir, you need to go to the hospital immediately," the paramedic insisted. As they prepared to transport me, one officer remained in the house, conducting a thorough inspection of the boarded windows and electronic locks. I heard him radio his partner. "This doesn't look accidental. This looks like someone was imprisoned here." I was being strapped to a gurney when the officer's flashlight beam caught the edge of the attic access panel, slightly ajar. "What's up there?" he asked, reaching for the panel. "Just storage," I replied quickly. "Old Christmas decorations, winter clothes." The officer pulled the panel open anyway, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusty darkness of the crawlspace. "Come out with your hands visible," he commanded. There was a moment of terrible stillness. Then, slowly, Douglas emerged from the attic, dust covering his expensive suit, his expression one of complete defeat. "Douglas Weston?" the officer asked, reaching for handcuffs. "We have some questions for you." My son didn't resist as he was cuffed. His eyes found mine as the officer recited his rights. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." As the paramedics wheeled me toward the ambulance, I heard Douglas's voice crack as he began confessing everything to the officer. The loan sharks, the gambling debts, the imprisonment, all of it pouring out in a torrent of guilt and relief. Watching my only child being placed in a police car, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness. The officers had found the loan sharks too. The SUV had been stopped less than a mile away. 2 men with criminal records and outstanding warrants were taken into custody. As the ambulance doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of my son in the back of the patrol car, his head in his hands. Despite everything he had done, my heart ached for him. We had both lost so much, and the road ahead would be difficult for us both. The hospital kept me for 7 days. My heart had suffered minor damage from the stress and missed medication, but the doctors assured me it would heal with time and proper care. The dehydration and malnutrition were treated with IV fluids and a carefully monitored diet. Physically, I was on the mend. Emotionally, the healing would take longer. My story made the local news, though I refused all interview requests. Neighbors I barely knew sent flowers and cards. The radio operator, Terry, visited twice, awkwardly accepting my tearful thanks for saving my life. James, my lawyer friend, handled the legal aftermath with compassionate efficiency. The most difficult decision was whether to press charges against Douglas. The district attorney wanted to pursue multiple felony counts: elder abuse, false imprisonment, fraud, forgery. The list went on, carrying potential sentences totaling more than 20 years. After much reflection, I agreed to the charges, but requested that addiction treatment be incorporated into any sentencing. Douglas needed consequences, but he also needed help. When I returned home after a week, the community had rallied. The boarded windows had been replaced, the electronic locks reprogrammed, the refrigerator stocked with food. An emergency medical alert system had been installed, courtesy of a local seniors organization. But the house still held memories I wasn't sure I could live with. Every room reminded me of Douglas's betrayal. I considered selling, starting fresh somewhere else. Instead, I decided to reclaim my space. I repainted every room, rearranged furniture, and replaced the flooring in areas that triggered the worst memories. It became therapy, transforming the crime scene back into a home. 2 months after the incident, I joined a support group for victims of family violence. That's where I met Sarah, a retired social worker who led the group. Her straight-talking approach cut through the guilt and confusion I still carried. "You didn't cause your son's addiction," she told me during one session, "and you couldn't have cured it. Those are his responsibilities." Sarah encouraged me to connect with my neighbors, to break the isolation that had made me vulnerable. I started hosting monthly coffee gatherings on my back porch, began volunteering at the local library, joined a walking group for seniors. 3 months after his arrest, I visited Douglas in county jail while he awaited sentencing. The visitation room was cold and sterile, nothing like the warm family home where I'd raised him. Douglas looked different. The designer clothes were replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His carefully styled hair had grown out, showing early gray I'd never noticed before. But the most significant change was in his eyes. The desperate wildness was gone, replaced by something more grounded. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking as I sat across from him. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I admitted. We sat in uncomfortable silence before he spoke again. "I've been in therapy here. Addiction counseling." He stared at his hands. "They say I have to make amends, but I don't even know where to start. What I did to you was unforgivable," I finished for him. At least it feels that way right now. He nodded, accepting this without argument. I'm not here to offer forgiveness, Douglas. That may come someday, but not yet. I'm here because you're my son, and because I want you to get better. I want that too, he whispered. For the first time, I actually want to change. We talked for the full allowed hour, about his childhood, about where things went wrong, about the gambling that started as entertainment and grew into an all-consuming monster, about his genuine remorse and fear of the future. Before leaving, I established clear boundaries. I would support his recovery, but not enable his addiction. I would attend family therapy sessions, but wouldn't make excuses for him to authorities. I would be his father, but not his savior. You have to save yourself, Douglas, I told him. I'll be here if you do the work, but only if you do the work. 6 months later, Douglas was sentenced. 5 years in state prison, with mandatory addiction treatment and mental health counseling. The judge cited his full confession and evident remorse as factors in not imposing the maximum sentence. As Douglas was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at me sitting in the courtroom. No words were exchanged, but a silent understanding passed between us. This was rock bottom. The only way forward was up. During that year, I became an advocate for elder protection laws. I spoke at senior centers about the warning signs of financial abuse. I worked with local banks to implement better safeguards against fraud. My story helped others recognize and address similar situations before they escalated. Now, 2 years after those terrible days locked in my own home, I can share what I've learned with you. First, family ties don't guarantee safety. Love doesn't prevent addiction or desperation. Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayals precisely because we trust them so completely. Second, enabling isn't love. For years, I gave Douglas money without addressing the real problem. I looked away from evidence of gambling because confrontation felt too difficult. My silence and support didn't help him. They prolonged his addiction. Third, forgiveness is a process, not an event. I haven't fully forgiven my son yet, but I'm working toward it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means releasing the anger that keeps you trapped in the past. Finally, age doesn't diminish worth. At 67, I'm more engaged with my community than ever before. I've made new friends, learned new skills, and found purpose in helping others avoid what happened to me. Douglas will be eligible for parole next year. His letters and our monthly calls suggest he's committed to recovery. He's completing a degree in prison, counseling fellow inmates with gambling problems. I'm cautiously hopeful but realistic. Recovery is never guaranteed. Whatever happens with Douglas, I've rebuilt my life on my own terms. The home that was once my prison is now truly mine again. The relationships I've formed since the incident are stronger and more authentic than many I had before. Sometimes I sit on my back porch watching the sunset, just as I did when Elaine was alive. I tell her about our son, about my hopes and fears for his future. I like to think she would be proud of how I've handled this ordeal. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you so completely? Could you find the strength to rebuild? Has family betrayal touched your life in ways you're still processing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more life experiences that might help you navigate your own challenges. Remember to hit the like button if you found value in my journey from betrayal to resilience. Thanks for listening. And may your own family relationships bring you strength rather than sorrow.